Divers have found World War II-era bombs in a lagoon in Tuvalu as part of Operation Render Safe, involving the navies of Australia, New Zealand and Canada alongside the US Marine Corps. The explosives are thought to have been dumped by the US military at the end of the war.
Over a period of about 2 weeks, we found 22 500-pound World War-era bombs in the Nanamuia lagoon. We did have reports that there was at least one bomb located previously, but to go up there over a period of 3 days and find 22 was not really expected.
Nearly 80 years after the end of World War II, we're still cleaning up the mess. Cities have been rebuilt, borders redrawn, but there's still an estimated 1.6 million tonnes of ordnance on ocean floors. Some experts say there's a lot more than that. In a sense, the Tuvalu find is a drop in the ocean of a project that may never end.
Operation Render Safe is an enduring operation and mainly led from the Australian Defence Force. And previously, the areas that they've worked in were the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and obviously moving on to Tuvalu.
I don't think we'll ever get there. You know, it's a bit of an ongoing activity because we don't know where everything is.
On land, those explosive remnants of war, or ERW, are also still a clear and present danger. Some of our Pacific islands are still in dire need of a clean-up.
I don't even think you could put enough zeros on how much would be needed to do it properly.
I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, what we dumped after the war, who we dumped it on, and how the clean-up's going.
HMS Argentina spent the last 2 weeks transiting around the Solomon Islands looking for Second World War bombs that have been left behind from the war. So we go and search areas utilising our sonar, our vehicles and our divers, and then if we find something, we have got the explosives and the equipment on board to explosively detonate anything that we find on the seabed.
We know where some items of ordnance are. It's just getting the governments to agree for us to go and get rid of them, and it takes time.
Lieutenant Commander Simon Marston is the officer in charge of the dive group at HMNZS Matatawa, which is the specialist unit that took part in Operation Render Safe. That was an Australian-led exercise, but New Zealand has an equivalent operation called Pukorua.
Every 2 years we try and get up to the islands and do some work around the explosive remnants of war.
And does the Navy just look after the stuff that's in the water?
No, we have done some land clearance activities as well during recent Pukoruas and render safes.
OK, so there must be an awful lot still up there then.
There's a huge amount. If you look, I guess one of the areas that we used to do a lot of clearance in the Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal area, there are some huge battles up that way. So a lot of ordnance gets thrown around, and I think the World War II statistic is around 10% of all munitions fired fail to function as designed. So, I guess there's a lot of stuff lying around.
But fail to function doesn't mean that it's not dangerous now?
Yeah, correct. So the types of munition that we tend to deal with are a mixture of unfused munitions that have been dumped post-conflict. So it's just an easy way to get rid of them, hide them underwater.
So deliberately they defuse them and deliberately dump them?
And they've probably never been fused. So these things just sit in storage depots or the field depots that they had ready to be fused, weren't used. Just stick them, get them on a dumper truck, get them on a barge and sink a barge off one of the islands somewhere. So you come across these barges that are full of projectiles, which are the artillery rounds. The danger with those sort of things is that obviously over time, the explosive breaks down and becomes slightly more sensitive inside them. They are reasonably safe to move, so we can sort of bring them up, move them to somewhere else. But the idea is we don't let them dry out because that can cause the explosives to get a little bit more sensitive.
So do you just lift the whole barge up?
No, so we would have to empty the barge. Yeah, we don't have that facility. You probably wouldn't want to be moving a whole pile of explosives onto a ship.
So then what do you do with them? How do you dispose of them?
So we negotiate with the local government, local governance, I suppose, around the area and look for a disposal site on land where we can safely stack and then put in protective works, mitigate any explosive danger and get rid of them.
So you're talking about bury them or blow them up?
No, we detonate, yeah. So we use explosives to get rid of them. But it's the cleanest way of removing the danger.
But this is a problem all over the world.
Really what's happening is people are moving further out into the oceans, right? So when these things were first disposed, and most of them were intended to be disposed at depths where people would never reach, I don't think they were conceiving of undersea cables or wind power that was installed at sea. So we are expanding our reach into the ocean, and that's why we're encountering these legacy items.
This is Dr. Margot Edwards, a marine geologist at the University of Hawaii, who's been involved in projects finding and mapping dumped munitions, many of them chemical weapons.
Mostly they were dumped by the military at the end of wars. So a lot of the munitions, the majority, I would say, are found around the European Union, but there are a lot around the U.S. too, and around Hawaii. There are a lot in the Pacific, wherever, fighting was happening. But, it wasn't just the U.S., it wasn't just the Brits, it wasn't just the Germans. It was pretty much everybody that was engaged in war. And it has been happening for a long time. We have evidence in Hawaii of munitions that were, dumped even prior to the start of World War I.
And does that pose a danger now?
So that's a great question. And the answer, unfortunately, depends on so many things. Where you are in the world, how deep the munitions were disposed, whether or not the munitions that were disposed were damaged, what the environmental conditions are like. You can imagine that some environments corrode more than other kinds of environments. The ocean is a big and complicated place. And so, trying to figure out what to do is almost a site-by-site remediation effort.
In the Tuvalu discovery that our Navy was involved in, the commander of the HMNZS Manawanui, John McQueen, told Morning Report disposal is not easy.
It might be that they get floated and then taken to a disposal site. One of the options also is to destroy them on site, but obviously that will have an impact on the ecology and biodiversity of the lagoon. There's ways of safely doing that, but that's probably a last resort.
What is the safe way to do that?
Well, there's several methods. There's kind of what's called low ordering them, which is to inject a small amount of explosive on the side of the bombs themselves, and then that tries to burn out the explosive material inside the bomb. But then also high ordering them, which is to put a bigger charge, and effectively that would mean that the bomb would blow up underwater, and we can obviously try and make that as safe as possible for the environment and the people.
One of the things that they've been experimenting with in the United States is what's called cut and capture. So they will make a small hole in the metal casing so that they can put sort of a suction device on the munition and suck out the constituents. It's obviously very labor intensive, but the alternative is to destroy all the animals that have formed a habitat after decades on the munitions. And that's in some ways even worse than having the constituents leak into the environment.
So when you talk about constituents, are you talking about chemicals that leach out?
Yeah, so I think of it as two kinds of chemicals. There's the chemicals for explosives, right? Like TNT, which is the one that we typically think of. And then there was actually chemical agent, which were things like mustard that were meant to explode and create, aerosols that would harm the enemy. The difference between those two is that most of the munitions that had chemical agent in them had tens to hundreds of pounds of agent on the inside of them and just a much smaller amount of an explosive.
So other than this labour-intensive method of drilling in and getting the chemicals out, what other means are used to dispose of them?
Not very much work has done on trying to pick them up from the bottom. There have been efforts to encase them in, like concrete. There have obviously been examples of blowing up the munition in place. That typically tends to happen when it seems like there's really a potential for damage. For example, a trawler might come along and hit the munition and hurt people. And then the other thing is, there have been remotely operated vehicles that have gone down and picked things up and brought them back up to the surface. Usually what is done is there's now chemical neutralization processes, right, that didn't exist back in the 1940s, so that they can, kind of cut into them and neutralize the chemical constituents. They can also burn them. They have very fancy ovens for burning the munitions that'll contain all of the material.
At the end of World War II, for example, what was the mentality of dumping these? Was there no forward plan? Did they mark, for example, where they put them?
The options back then were not ideal. Maybe they're never ideal, but the options back then were basically you could bury them, right? Which meant that if they leaked because of corrosion, they could potentially leak into a water table, which would be bad. You could burn them, which for the reasons that we were just discussing would be bad. They could explode, they could go into the air column, or you could, dispose of them at sea, which is about 70% of the planet. And back then, when we weren't really doing telecommunications cables underwater and building wind farms offshore, disposing them at sea seemed like the safest option.
And they didn't necessarily feel they had to map the GPS location of where it was?
They couldn't map the GPS location. That's a great question. And people often forget that back in 1944, they didn't have GPS, right? I was privileged to meet one of the people that he came forward after we were discussing my research and the news in Hawaii. And he told me that, they used sort of the old wayfinding techniques. You would go out to sea and hold your hand in that configuration, like call me, right? And when the size of a building on the shore was from the bottom tip of your little finger to the top tip of your thumb, you were far enough offshore, and that's when you could start disposing the munitions. We didn't have the same kind of navigation capability back then. We haven't had the ability to precisely locate where ships were.
Did that gentleman help you? Did what he say lead to discoveries?
He absolutely did. He told me what the process was for the dumping, and we've since been able to find some old movie news that showed exactly what he was describing. But finding pictures from that era, finding even written documentation of what was done, the documentation that we found in Hawaii that was really, most important to telling us where to go look, said 5 miles offshore of Oahu, right? That's a very large area.
How difficult is it to locate ordnance on the ocean floor?
Yeah, it's fairly difficult, but Matsuto is lucky. We have a number of sensor systems available that we utilize for different things, and one of the uses obviously is finding things on the seabed. So explosive remnants of war is no different. We've got autonomous systems that utilize side scan sonar, so they can give us a picture of something, and they're pretty accurate in terms of positioning, and also the picture is pretty good.
So that's a little robot camera that you send under the water?
Well, this is an autonomous system. It's like a torpedo, I guess, is a good way of looking at it. And you can plan a mission into it on the surface and tell it to go and look in this area. And it'll basically just go up and down with its side scan sonar and map the seabed. And then they can get the apparatus back post-mission and download all the content and go through all the sonar files and have a look for any objects of interest.
Are they hard to spot? Because one of the pictures I saw, it was just so encrusted by corals and marine life that it looked like part of the furniture kind of thing.
Yeah, they are. So some of the larger ordnance items, the things that have been down there for years, if it's not attached to a ammunition barge that's been sunk, then yeah, they can be quite difficult. So we also have other systems, towed sonar systems that can be controlled from a small craft, so we can be quite accurate with where we put it. We also got systems that are diver handheld systems. So you can either look for the magnetic signature of the object using a magnetometer, which can tell a diver that there's something large and magnetic over here, and it kind of leads into it, or the diver can bring it up on his sonar.
I was told that there was about 1.6 million tonnes of ordnance under the world's oceans. Any idea of how much is in our backyard?
I would say that was a massive underestimation.
Really?
Yeah, I've been dealing with unexploded ordnance for 30 years, and mostly around up until 2007 around the UK, which had 3 million mines were laid between Britain and France in World War II. Only 1 million have been accounted for. So there's 2 million undersea mines alone, so that's not including any other sort of ordnance that's been dumped or has found its way, airdropped weapons that have found their way into the sea. So I would guess there's a huge amount in the Pacific, and from my recollection of past activities that I've been involved in out in Papua New Guinea, Kiribati, Solomon Islands, we go out for maybe 4 weeks to do these activities, and we're not, it's a hugely busy period. We don't ever come away thinking, well, that's cleared that up.
What danger does it currently pose to people? Why do we not just leave it there to rot?
Yeah, so I know definitely in the Solomon Islands and probably some of the other island groups as well, that people, they know where a lot of this stuff is, that just through local knowledge. And this information has been passed down from village elders, that were there when it was dumped or saw the munition go in. It's surprising how many times you listen to these stories of people that were told where this thing is, and they know exactly where they are. And what happens is they pick this stuff up because it contains explosives and it's useful to them. Dynamite fishing is quite a big thing out in the islands, where they reuse the explosive to create charges to help them catch fish.
That does not sound safe.
No, it's not safe at all. And quite often over time you'll hear of stories of people just having incidents and accidents with these kind of explosives.
The Pacific was a key battleground in the Second World War. And wartime relics can be found all over islands like Nauru. Some still pose a very real danger.
Historically, there's a lot of people from the Solomon Islands have been injured from trying to use these explosives for fishing, ornamental purposes. People just have an interest in what's been left behind, and they play with them, and obviously people can get hurt.
It never occurs to any one of us staying here of the clear and present danger.
RNZ Pacific journalist Karoy Hawkins grew up in the Solomon Islands and is now most definitely aware of that clear and present danger.
Battle of Guadalcanal, all of the fighting up through the shortlands into New Guinea. Yeah, hundreds of World War II aircraft, ships, some of the worst, fiercest fighting of the Pacific theatre of war happened in and around the Solomon Islands. So yeah, very much grew up with the history around us. My mother, one of her earliest memories she shared with me was being in a foxhole in Hope Island in the Western Province, and just seeing her uncle silhouetted against the front of the mouth of the foxhole with tracer fire going across the islands. And she said it was just a huge thing for them. Imagine people that are still sort of coming in to modern technology, maybe had a few cars, just getting roads, and then to have these huge US aircraft carriers, destroyers, basically moving islands turn up on their shores. So it was quite a brutal introduction to the theatre of war for a lot of Solomon Islanders. So yeah, we grew up collecting dog tags. We used to go out, collect bullets, went up and checked out foxholes. Well, I have uncles who have huge collections of various bits and pieces of from Japanese bayonets to helmets to actually fully intact rifles that still fire. If you're lucky, you get them that are the crates that are wrapped in greaseproof paper, and you still get some where the wood's rotted away, but the functioning bits still function.
Are these relics of the past, or are they still experiencing that? Do you still sometimes literally trip over old casings and bullets and things?
Yeah, definitely. You can. There's places in the jungle where you walking over shells. Like if you're going into where the battlefields are and the zones, and you don't have to dig very far down, just under the mulch, the leaf mulch in the ground to get to casings. And the incendiary, the dangerous part is obviously the bombs and the explosive that is still live ammunition. Like we used to thought it was heaps of fun because some of the kids used to cut into the bombs. And we'd get they're like cylindrical gunpowder capsules, they empty them out from inside the bomb casings. So on our wooden desks in school, we used to line them up and draw sort of our names, our initials on the desk, and light them with a match, and then they just burn our names into the desk, but not realizing that.
Oh my gosh!
Like, you know, we were playing with dangerous stuff, man. Like we didn't realize that if they had triggered the whatever it was, the tip of the bomb or whatever, it would have killed us, you know. So, and there are tragically a lot of stories of Solomon Islanders who are just lighting fires. Even in the last couple of years, there was a youth group in Honiara, in the capital, where they were just cooking a meal for the youth for a fundraising, and they died because there was a bomb underneath it. Anything that was used in the war is lying around. But the problem is, like, a lot of the life in the villages is slash and burn agriculture for subsistence living, and so people are cutting and burning all the time for their gardens, and people are getting killed because they just happen to be burning old ammo dump site, or come across a hand grenade and it kills them. So yeah, there's horrific stories of people that have been maimed, and then other people are actually using the World War II explosives. So they cut into the bombs, get the gunpowder, pack it into bottles, and use it as dynamite to kill fish. For fishing, and some of them get hurt because it obviously, you know, mistime the timer, blows up in their hands and blinds them and all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's huge legacy from the war that really needs to be looked at properly. Yeah.
80 years on from the Second World War, and Solomon Islands is demanding that former enemies, Japan and the United States, clean up deadly unexploded bombs.
Back in the day, it was kind of just accepted that, you know, this is what happens, this is the war happened, you know, and this is what it is. But I think nowadays you're seeing a lot more people being vocal and being like, hang on, you know, this is stuff that you've left behind, that you have responsibility to clear. And with the advantage of the increased geopolitical interest in the Pacific is that some of this stuff can be leveraged now to actually get some funding in to work and to help. And I know there's little bits of funding that are there. Australia and New Zealand have done a lot to train. I think our bomb disposal team in the Solomons is probably one of the best in the Pacific Islands, of the Pacific Island countries. They deal with it so much. But still, yeah, it's a real danger. Like, I was in a cab with a taxi driver, and he was showing off very proudly this rusted old American hand grenade that he had rattling around in his car. And the roads in Solomon Islands, if you know them, are full of potholes and all of this. And this thing was just rattling around on near his dashboard. And I'm like, I quickly sort of, you know, just educated him on, man, you need to get this out of your car and to the police.
But we're nearly 80 years on now from the end of World War II. And it seems to me that where's the outrage? I mean, where's the pickup crew? Where's the kind of constant pressure on governments to do something about this? It seems like it's something you've almost accepted.
Yeah, it's been put in the too hard basket for too long. Like, it's just like, I'll explain it this way. Like, the hills around my town in Munda, when you're landing on the airfield, which is actually a World War II airfield, they're covered in greenery and they look pristine. You know, you look like coming in, this pristine Pacific island. But if you go under the brush and actually go into the mountains, there's roads cut into the hills, like terraces with indents for the hospital bays and the ammo dumps, and that the whole landscape was like denuded of forestry and turned into like an operational base with hospitals and ammo dumps and airfields and all of this. So underneath the greenery that covers a lot of Solomon Islands is if you take all the greenery away, you'll still see the infrastructure and the impact of the war on the actual land, if you know what I mean. Like, it's cut into the land.
It's not always as easy as, a government turning around and saying, I've got all this stuff I need to get rid of, can you please come and do it? There's other considerations. For Vanuatu, for example, these things are at the entrance to the port. So, if we start closing down ports that have got cruise ships alongside, etc., then it becomes quite messy. We could go out there tomorrow and do this activity. However, what we need to have in place for the safety of the people conducting that is the right medical support. And that involves quite high-end medical support. You need the ability to be able to evacuate somebody immediately by helicopter, so that therefore we need a platform to carry a helicopter. We need support in terms of the right medical people. And obviously they've been pretty busy the last few years. It's not gone away. And really the amount of work that ourselves, the ADF, the US and other countries that are involved, we really haven't skimmed the surface of it, to be honest. So it's definitely not gone away.
How many millions of dollars would you need to go through those salvage and secure operations? And there's just not, at the moment, any political will to be doing any of that stuff because there's so much out there.
That's it for today. I'm Alexia Russell. The Detail is public interest journalism funded through NZ On Air and produced by Newsroom for RNZ. You can get us downloaded free to your mobile device every weekday from any podcast platform. Today's episode was engineered by Phil Benge and produced by Mark Jennings. Thanks to Dr. Margot Edwards, Lieutenant Commander Simon Marston and Karoi Hawkins. Mā te wā.